wound in President Kennedy. They were told not to track that by military superior officers that were in the room with them. This is a significant piece of testimony because it obviously violates the rules of a basic homicide investigation. Additionally, through Jim Garrison's work, we know from the Gemberling document and the reports of the FBI that there was a shallow wound found in President Kennedy's back, 6 inches below the shoulder blade. That shallow wound, in its essence, defeats the possibility of a magic bullet going through the back and coming out the throat. That, among other things, is some of the work that Garrison has contributed.
Well, for a person who had several storylines at the same time, I think you gave that a great deal of consideration, and I appreciate your response very much. Mr. Horton.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stone, I wanted to commend you also for your direction of the movie and for preparing the movie and making it possible. I also think that it's a good thing that attention has been brought to this subject. As I indicated, I was one of the original co-sponsors with Mr. Stokes, along with Mr. Conyers, of the resolution. And as you've heard me say here today, I feel it's very important that we move forward with the resolution and that the President sign it. We get on with the business at hand. For your information and others, there are some people who think that the release of the material should be looked at by others and then interpreted. That's not my feeling. My feeling is that it ought to be released and then let happen what happens. Let people interpret what happens. So I'm for releasing it, and I commend former President Ford for his quickness to take the same position that we should release this material as quickly as possible. And I hope as a result of Mr. Ford's efforts that the President and the administration will cooperate with us and move forward with this legislation so that it won't be controversial and it won't end up by being vetoed, because I think that would be very unfortunate. I think the material ought to come out. With regard to the movie, what information did you have available to you? Were you just dealing with press releases or testimony from Mr. Garrison, or what type of information did you have, and was it based on factual material?
We based our movie on Mr. Garrison's book On the Trail of the Assassins, which details his investigation and the problems he had. As you know, he was for open government back then in 1967 through 9. He subpoenaed Allen Dulles, ex-chief of the CIA, and Charles Cabell, Richard Bissell. Those subpoenas were squashed once again by the Justice Department. Mr. Garrison tried to run a trial in the light of day. His office was bugged. He was bribed. The media essentially made him, I think, into a non-person and ridiculed him, and he has suffered from that libel for more than 20 years. We based part of the movie on the book by Jim Marrs called Crossfire, which is a compendium basically of the research done by private individuals, people without money, who formed over a course of years a small network of 12 to 20 people who communicated with each other, starting with people like Sylvia Marr, who wrote the book Accessories After the Fact, which examined in detail the Warren Commission contradictions. And it was this small network of private researchers that I believe have done the most serious and progressive work in the assassination, whereas I feel that government bodies, from the Warren Commission on down, have stagnated in their investigation into this area. We also based the film in part on Warren Commission sources and public sources that we could find, including living witnesses who came to our attention, people who were in Dallas that day, people who sent us letters, people who talked to us. We did our homework conscientiously. Of course, we were at one point, we could not go further than we could because many of these files, as you know, were sealed to the American public in the 1960s and were never opened, and the Warren Commission information was always compromised by the fact that the CIA, the FBI, military intelligence never gave any significant information to the Warren Commission members. And in fact, the Warren Commission was chaired, one of the members of the Warren Commission was Allen Dulles, who had been fired by President Kennedy as the chief of the CIA. There seems to be the element of the fox investigating the chicken coop here. Among some of the records that we were dying to get hold of in order to elaborate on our theories in the film are the testimony to the House Committee of people like Santos Traficante, Richard Case Nagel, William Sullivan, who was the chief of covert operations in the FBI, Atlee Phillips, who was a CIA agent, Delphine Roberts, the secretary to Guy Bannister, Marina Oswald, Wally Weston, George de Mohrenschildt, who testified, Dean Andrews, William Walter, the Dallas doctors, the Bethesda doctors. We have more than 43 hours of Cuban exiled interviews that were done that we don't have access to. 47 hours of something called JFK hearings. We don't know what's in those 47 hours. Frank Sturgis, Joseph Miltier, still living, Richard Helms, Admiral Berkeley, H.L. Hunt, CIA agent at that time, Warren DeBreeze, an FBI agent in New Orleans at that time who knew Oswald very well, who is still living, Robert Webster, another defector who defected to the Soviet Union and returned a month before Oswald to this country, a pattern similar to Oswald's, Ruth Payne, who knew the Oswalds very well in Dallas.
All these names that you're mentioning, the ones that are living, did you contact them, or
no? None of these people would talk to us.
Yes.
But first of all, I see Professor Blakey is back in the room, and I want to apologize to him and tell him that on reconsideration of the statement that he submitted, it will be accepted into the record. And then I'd like to ask Mr. Stone this question, sir. What is your theory of the John F. Kennedy assassination?
Contrary to the many misrepresentations you've read in the press, that I have postulated some massive conspiracy where 4,000 people get together at a convention in Miami Beach and call for the murder of the president. If you look at the film closely, which is quite possible now that the video cassette is coming out and you can have a second viewing in your home and pause and stop and actually listen to what people are saying, you will find that there are essentially two conspiracies are hypothecated. The first one, a conspiracy to kill the president, which is very small and covert in nature. I can see as little as 5 to 10 people being involved in it. I think it was done in a very sophisticated manner, where people who, if they are living, would not even know the names of the people that gave them the orders to do it. I think it had to come from an element in government that was practiced in this art of assassination. The only people with that sort of experience are obviously the intelligence agencies who had been doing it abroad in the 1950s and in the early 60s. I think that expertise was brought home into America, and I think that we should look closer at the Operation Mongoose, because that was essentially a paramilitary unit in these shores, run by Colonel Lansdale, or General Lansdale, and in it we have all the realistic equipment, manpower with which to accomplish something of this scope. We should look, the House and the Senate should look at the Operation Mongoose files. It should be open. There's a second conspiracy I hypothecate, and that is the conspiracy to cover it up. And that cover-up, I believe, has been going on for 28 years, and most recently expressed itself in the vehement attacks and misrepresentations on my film. That cover-up, I believe, involved people like Lyndon Johnson. I think the appointment of the Warren Commission was a means by which to derail a serious homicide investigation which was never accomplished. A trial should have been held in Texas. The body should have been examined in Texas by, and as we know, the Bethesda autopsy through the investigation of James Garrison, we know that autopsy was a compromised, if not a rigged affair. The cover-up extends, I believe, to the FBI and Mr. Hoover, at that time chairman of the FBI. Mr. Hoover's, let's say, to use a euphemism, open dislike for the Kennedys. And I think it extends to people in the Warren Commission, such as Alan Dulles, whose motives, I think, are subject to scrutiny. But I don't think necessarily that the people involved in the cover-up were people involved in the conspiracy to kill him. What I did in the movie was show a paradigm of possibilities. I showed a president that deeply divided the country, made many enemies through policies against, intended to end the Cold War. His American University speech, I think, is an eloquent testimony by an American president to ending the Cold War. Signing the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was a major breakthrough. Backdoor negotiations with Fidel Castro, a warming relationship with the Premier Khrushchev of Russia, a strict no-combat policy in Laos and in Vietnam, a no-combat policy in Cuba on 2 occasions, Bay of Pigs and prior to the missile crisis of October '62. I think we have a president that was moving on many fronts to rock the boat, to shake the establishment. And I think we must look there for the root causes of people who were, if not involved in assassinating the president, were certainly relieved to see him go.
Thank you so much. Now, could I just finish up with this one point? Justice Warren was the chairman of his commission. Do you feel that, in your theory, he was involved in either of the 2 conspiracies?
I had one slight misstatement I would like to correct. I said H.L. Hunt when I meant Howard Hunt. H.L. Hunt is a private citizen. Howard Hunt was a government employee. He was a CIA agent who was involved, as you know, with Watergate. So
we had both of them before the committee, so... but at any rate,
yes.
Would you give me your impression or your thoughts as to the possible involvement of either of the conspiracy theories on the part of the late Chief Justice Earl Warren?
No, sir, I do not believe that Justice Warren was involved in either conspiracy. I do believe that an inordinate amount of pressure was brought to bear on Justice Warren to take this job. By accounts of the journalists that knew him during this period, he was an older man and partially senile. There is a written account of President Johnson's meeting with him where President Johnson used the terminology of, if you don't take this kind of job, we are looking at a situation where World War III is possible. 40 million lives are at stake. Earl Warren did not want it. I gather that President Johnson pressured him. My particular belief, if you care to know it, is that President Johnson said something of this nature to Earl Warren. He said, look, Oswald extends to Cuba. This thing goes to Cuba. If the American people find this out, they're going to want to invade Cuba, or they're going to want to take some kind of vengeance on Fidel Castro. If that happens, the Russians are going to come in, and we're going to be in another World War III situation, as we were 11 months ago at during the October missile crisis. The American people were tired of the possibility of war, scared of it. It was better to keep this in the closet and find Oswald to be the lone assassin and let the story end there. And I think that President Johnson not only told this to Justice Warren, I think he used this very palpable excuse in talking not only to Justice Warren, but to the major newspapers of the time. Because there was an appalling lack of investigation on the part of New York Times, Washington Post, Time Magazine, and Newsweek Magazine, and CBS News and NBC News to investigate this matter.
Just a couple of more questions. Did you attempt to get some of the material that you referred to earlier that was held by the administration or some of the agencies of the administration?
We have used the services of the archive. The name escapes me, but basically Kevin Walsh is running the
archives.
What's it called? The Assassination Archives here in Washington. They've been trying for years with Freedom of Information Acts to get information out. We used a lot of their work because obviously to make a movie we had a year's time span, and in order to get Freedom of Information documents it takes a lot longer. We used also a lot of private researchers have demanded this information. We used their information that they had. But we have not been able to talk to the people that I mentioned before. They do not want to talk to us. Obviously, I feel strongly that an inquiry